Welcome, Gunrunner.
Just under a year ago, I did an amazing facts video on the obscure but highly underrated Bally Astrocade console, one of the earliest competitors to the industry-defining Atari 2600, that packed some serious power under its hood. Unfortunately, that power came at a price, which is why it never really took off, despite being backed by the leading arcade manufacturer of the time, and delivering some very impressive home conversions of their games too. Being based on Bally's own arcade hardware, the first console to do such a thing, was the reason for both the high cost and quality of his arcade ports, but the limited distribution of the console did little to help matters either. In 1981, just 3 years after the console debuted, Bally decided to give up on it completely to concentrate on their booming arcade game business that had been bolstered by a string of big-name licensing deals with Japanese companies that saw them secure the rights to big-name blockbusters like Galaxian, Pac-Man and Space Invaders. They sold the console onto a new company called Astrovision, who continued to support it until they became one of the earliest victims of the great North American video game crash in 1983, but I don't want to go too much into the history of the console and its custodians too much here, as it's well covered in the aforementioned Amazing Facts video, which I will link down in the description for those who want to know more. Because what we're going to be focusing on here is the games, and specifically its system exclusives. Despite the Astrocade not having a particularly large library, and a large percentage of those being ports of early Bally Midway arcade games like Seawolf, Wizard of War, Space Invaders, Gunfight and Galaxian, there is actually quite a nice selection of titles to look at, especially from third parties. The open nature of the Astrocade certainly helped with this, so without further ado, I present to you 10 amazing Bally Astrocade exclusives.
If you took one of America's leading video games and added 3 built-in games, 4-player capability, a 3-octave music synthesizer, 256 color variations, a built-in calculator, and a basic program making it a personal home computer, you'd have Astrocade, the professional arcade. With a never-ending library of coin-op quality, exciting games. Astrocade, it's a home entertainment sensation.
So let's start off with a sports game then, shall we? And yes, I know what you're saying. Early sports games are usually rubbish and very unexciting, and you certainly have a point, especially as far as the Astrocade is concerned, as indeed most of the sports games that appeared on it are total rubbish. However, that's the exact reason why I'm including this one here, because it's actually very playable. Esoterica's Super Slope is certainly pretty simple in nature. All you do is guide your little skier down a single slope and try to do it in the fastest time possible. But everything is so well implemented here that it's hard to pick fault. As you slide across the snow, you also have to avoid trees and rocks that get in your way. If you do collide with one, you see a big crash and lose valuable seconds as the skier tries to get back on his feet. The longer you stay on your feet, the faster you ski, well up to a point anyway, and a perfect run is entirely possible if you possess the quick reflexes to do so. Graphics are excellent, the sound effects are pretty much perfect, and the controls work really well. There's no doubting that Super Slope is the best sports game available for the vintage console. The next game on this list should seem familiar to many of you in more than one way, because Star Battle was clearly inspired by the famous trench sequence from the original Star Wars movie, and also bears an uncanny resemblance to the Mattel Electronics game Star Strike, which was released for both the Intellivision and Atari 2600 the very same year. would certainly be interesting to discover if the similarity was down to both programmers having similar inspiration, or one seeing the other's game first. I guess we'll never know. In this game, for 1 or 2 players, you fly an X-Wing fighter down the trench, taking out the enemy TIE fighters, or in 2-player mode, the second player takes control of the latter. All you're trying to do is take them out before they do the same to you. As you move around the trench, moving up also speeds up your ship, and moving down slows it down. This is important as the game is using a 3D perspective, and you have to be directly in line with the enemy to shoot them down. Whether you're playing on your own or against a second player, you start the game by setting a target score to reach, and the first player to get there wins. It's that simple. Star Battle isn't the most exciting game in the world by any means, but wins extra points for its clever 3D graphics and design. What are historic arcade game manufacturers Bally best known for? The answer is pinball, of course. So it's only right that one of the system's earliest games would indeed be a simulation of the very thing that made the company famous. With such a legacy, you'd expect Bally Pin to be excellent, right? And yes, you would be right. In fact, the game was considered to be the best pinball simulation on the market for any home gaming system of the time, with Electronic Games magazine hailing it as being skillfully constructed with realistic play and vivid colours. I can certainly see why it had this reputation at the time, as it's certainly a far better game than the rival video pinball for the Atari 2600. There are 2 different tables here full of bumpers, flippers, drop targets, shoots and spinners. There are also some very realistic ball physics and excellent sound effects that only increase this realism further. Probably the most unique thing of all here though is the control method that uses both the Astrocade controllers with one controlling each set of flippers. The game can also be played by up to 4 people where you all compete for the high score. There's no doubting Bally Pin is an absolute essential for the Astrocade. At first looks, it seems like Astrovision's Solar Conqueror is just another copy of somebody else's game. In this case, the iconic Atari 2600 classic Yard's Revenge. On closer inspection, you will discover what is actually a pretty original and incredibly playable product. In the game, you're tasked with wiping out an aggressive alien race that is taking over important planets across the galaxy. You start by warping to the first location, which is a very impressive effect indeed, and then you are presented with a colourful playfield that shows a planet's surface on the right hand side and various enemies floating around you. Your task is simple: take out all the enemies so the planet commander surrenders, and then you move on to the next world. As well as regular enemies, there are also asteroids that you either have to avoid or shoot, and a missile launcher on the planet's surface. This is constantly launching nukes in your direction, but can be temporarily taken out by shooting it dead on. Your ship has full 360-degree movement and unlimited firepower. Solar Conqueror is undoubtedly one of the Astrocade's best exclusives. The visuals are superb, the audio is equally impressive, and it plays like a dream. Before Astrovision went out of business, which resulted in the complete discontinuation of the Astrocade, they planned to release a new series of games based on licensed properties to try and bring some more attention to the console. By far the most exciting of these was a game based on the classic Arnie flick Conan the Barbarian. Thankfully for us, the game wasn't completely lost, and a prototype managed to sneak out the door and be reproduced by the passionate Astrocade fanbase. The first interesting thing to note about Conan is that it actually started off as a game called Quest for the Orb, which in turn was based on the classic pen and paper adventure Orb Quest. So in essence we have a very early attempt at producing a console RPG, where your character has a set of specific characteristics, must fight monsters and collect items. Although I should add that in this prototype the latter of these hadn't actually been implemented yet. It's very clear that they were trying to do something very advanced for the time with this game, certainly leagues ahead of Atari's own adventure. Despite not being complete, there is more than enough in Conan to keep you busy. Once again we have an Astrocade game that certainly seems to have been inspired by another famous title, but with enough changes to make the formula taste very different. I don't think I need to tell you that this one was inspired by the classic Williams arcade game Defender. The similarities are pretty clear to see. There is the multi-directional scrolling, the clearly defined planet surface, alien invaders, enemy scanner, and a very similar audio-visual experience too. But there are no humans to save here, no stargates and no smart bombs either. So I better explain what it has instead. In Cosmic Raiders there are two ways to win each level, by clearing all the enemies or by destroying all the bombs that are slowly descending to the planet's surface. And it's the second one of these that's the most important, because destroying the bombs also produces special energy crystals that when collected make you invincible for a short amount of time. On later levels when things get really hectic, these become pretty much indispensable. Cosmic Raiders is a terrific game with awesome arcade style gameplay, great graphics and excellent audio also. Some people have described this game as a clone of the classic Bally arcade game and Mega Race, and I can certainly see the similarities, but for me it feels more like a cross between two other arcade classics in Asteroids and Berserk. And I'm sure you're already wondering how that works exactly, so I'll endeavour to explain. In the game you control a tiny ship that has full 360-degree movement and is greatly affected by inertia, just like Asteroids. This has to negotiate a series of screens in order to take out some kind of power plant. Most of these screens are surrounded by electrified walls, just like Berserk, that kill you on contact. Enemies are attacking you the entire time, so these have to both be taken out and avoided as needed in order to progress. Once you get to the power plant, you have to negotiate a small corridor which is harder than it sounds, and then once you destroy it, you do the same thing all over again, only harder. Blastroids has some pretty simple visuals, but they do the job perfectly, and decent sound effects too. The only small negative is the twitchy controls, which take a while to get the hang of, but once you do, you'll find a pretty rewarding game. Now if you looked at the name alone here, you'd no doubt think this was a Ms. Pac-Man clone, but actually Ms. Candyman is the Astrocade's only sequel, being the follow-up to the very lacking and unfinished feeling Candyman. Basically, L&M Software took all the criticisms aimed at the first game, such as the lack of colour, minimal audio, and unresponsive controls, and fixed them, which is certainly a good thing, because the original game actually had some quite nice ideas. Although it's also a maze game, it certainly plays very differently to Pac-Man, and involves you guiding your character around the grid-like screen, collecting the boxes of candy, and avoiding the goblins. There is no way to kill these annoying stalkers, so the only way to progress is to avoid them completely. Clear the screen of candy, and you do the same all over again, only with more and/or faster moving enemies. Ms. Candyman has some really nice touches, like Mr. Candyman trapped in a cage at the bottom of the screen, and the ambulance that carries you away when you die. The graphics are also nice and colourful, and the audio works really well here too. It's not that often that you come across an arcade-like maze game with an original concept, but here we are. With this third-party title, we have one of the best-looking games available for the Astrocade, especially that wonderful title screen. This one seems to have taken some inspiration from the classic Nintendo Game & Watch Octopus, but is a lot more advanced and certainly adds more than a few elements of its own. In Treasure Cove, you control a diver who is trying to recover some valuable items from the seabed before his air supply runs out. Once you grab a treasure, you simply have to return it to the ship that is roaming the waves above, which also replenishes your air supply. Grab all the goodies and it's on to the next level for more of the same, only harder. But what makes it harder? Good question, as that would be the all-important underwater inhabitants. These creatures will do their very best to get in your way and stop you from grabbing the loot. As more are added on each level, the waters become harder and more perilous to negotiate. According to the instructions, there are over 20 different sea creatures that can be spotted here, very impressive indeed. As well as the aforementioned excellent visuals, there is also some equally impressive in-game music too, Not just one tune either, there are a number of different ones. Treasure Cove is a really impressive game indeed. And from one ocean themed game to another, as we finish off this list with the first party Astrocade game, Pirate's Chase. And this is also another game that sees you trying to recover valuable treasure, but in a very different way indeed. In fact, this game reminded me an awful lot of the classic Bally Midway arcade game Solar Fox, and it actually made me wonder if it did indeed start off as an official port of that game that was altered and adapted after Astrovision took over control of the console to avoid any potential copyright infringement. You move what I can only assume is a compass across a beach, which appears to be soaked in blood, picking up coins whilst avoiding the ghost of Long John Silver, who is represented by skull and crossbones. Periodically, other valuable items such as rings and swords appear in the centre of the screen and can be collected for bonus points. Whilst every level is exactly the same, the speed ramps up quite considerably, with the ghost being almost impossible to avoid on the higher levels. The graphics here are pretty poor in all honesty, but there is some nice sound and music to make up for it. Okay, so Pirate's Chase gets a bit repetitive after a while, but it's still pretty fun in short blasts.
Bally Arcade, a new video computer system that gives you more than Atari or Intellivision. Arcade gives you 4-player capability and an incredible 256 colors. Arcade has features the others don't. A built-in music synthesizer, 3 built-in games, a calculator, and Bally Basic, making the Arcade a personal home computer. Arcade doesn't just play games.
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing Bally Astrocade exclusives. Can you think of any other one-off titles that only ever came out for this hugely powerful 8-bit console, or do you think some of these games are unworthy of inclusion? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges. Grady Haynes, Mitchell Valentino, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Sonic Mania 999, Paul Daniel, Andrew McKay, Retro Resolution, Maz Bandish, James Taylor, Trogdall the Burninator, Mins, 8-Bit Guy, Luke MC, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.